Applause thundered through the hall like a drumroll before an execution. The cameras glided smoothly across the faces of the audience, capturing admiring smiles, nervous lip twitches, whispered exchanges. It all looked like another episode of a regular evening talk show, until the man everyone had come to see stepped on stage. Tall, slightly hunched, in a black t-shirt and a gray blazer, Elon Musk appeared from behind the curtain, not as a hero, but as someone used to noise. He didn't wave his hands, didn't flash a fake smile, didn't pose as an idol. He simply walked up, shook the host's hand, and sat down. The camera caught a close-up of his calm face. The host, Thomas Brown, was cut from a different cloth. His movements were sharp, his gaze piercing, like a bird of prey trained to spot weakness. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "Elon, thanks for coming. It's amazing, really, you found time between tweeting about dogs and launching new crypto memes." The audience laughed. Musk gave a slight nod, saying nothing. "We've heard about Neuralink, about Mars rockets, about cars that drive themselves," Thomas continued, "but you do realize that to many people, you look more like a showman than an engineer." Musk raised his eyebrows, as if surprised by the question itself. "Well, I think that depends on your point of view," he replied calmly. "Sometimes a show is needed to make people finally pay attention to the essence." "And what is the essence?" the host interrupted. "Renaming Twitter to X and making people pay for a check mark?" The audience stirred again. Some laughed openly, others clapped. Elon looked at the host as if seeing through him. Not angry. Just observing a man digging his own grave, thinking he was setting a trap. "I didn't force anyone," he said. "I offered." "Right. Just like the idea of underground tunnels where cars get stuck in traffic, only underground. Genius, isn't it?" "First they laugh," Musk cut in. "Then they buy." An awkward pause. Thomas gave a brief smirk and, for the first time during the show, glanced at his cue cards, as if trying to regain control. "All right. Let's skip the jokes. You're a businessman, money, influence, billions. But let's be honest, you're not really an engineer. Not a real one. You buy ideas, you don't create them." It was a gut punch. One most guests would react to defensively, with a nervous smile, excuses, a change of subject. But Musk didn't flinch. He simply leaned forward. "Have you ever held a battery in your hands, Thomas?" "What?" "I'm asking, have you ever held a battery module? Watched it being assembled, piece by piece? Do you know how long it takes to tune the cooling system properly if you want the car to run instead of burn?" The audience went silent. This was unexpected. No, of course not. I'm not an engineer. I'm a host," Thomas said. "Exactly," Musk nodded. "And I am an engineer. I was assembling the first Falcon 1 components in a warehouse when we didn't even have an office or money. I didn't hire people to build things, I built them. And I still do." His voice was still calm. No grandstanding. But there was steel in it now. "You really want me to believe Elon Musk was tightening bolts with his own hands?" Thomas sneered. The audience must find that funny, admit it. But the audience wasn't laughing anymore. The cameras captured the silence. People looked from Musk to the host, waiting to see who would blink first. "You don't have to believe me," Elon said. "But I know every bolt in the Model S. I programmed the motor control software. I woke up at night because I couldn't get the energy output formula right under peak acceleration. And you just read questions off a card." Thomas opened his mouth but couldn't find a reply. Musk leaned back in his chair. "I came here expecting a conversation. Not a trial. But if you want to talk about showmanship, let's talk. I'll show you where the tricks end and reality begins." And the hall exploded, not with laughter or irony, but with applause. Hesitant at first, from just a few people, then growing louder. The host, stunned, tried to regain control. All right then, Elon. Let's talk. About the cars. Your smart boxes on wheels. I hope you're ready for real questions. Musk looked straight into the camera, as if speaking not to the host, but to everyone watching from home. Ready. Ask me how a three-phase inverter works when crossing the 0 point, and I'll answer. Because I've been there. And I know what I'm doing. The applause wouldn't stop. Thomas wasn't smiling. He could feel the control slipping through his fingers. The studio lights grew sharper, as if someone had increased the brightness of the spotlights in response to the shift in the conversation's tone. Thomas Brown, unaccustomed to losing the initiative, quickly flipped through his cards, eyes catching on the block of technical questions. He wanted to regain control, but he could feel time working against him. All right, Elon, he began with exaggerated calm, since you're so confident in your role as an engineer, tell me, how does Tesla handle battery degradation under rapid charge and discharge cycles, especially in extreme climate conditions? The camera panned to the audience. Someone nodded, the question sounded intelligent. Musk didn't even blink. We use liquid cooling with active thermal regulation based on ethylene glycol, he began calmly. The system distributes heat among the cells, monitoring each module in real time. And yes, the software adapts to climate data, factoring in average daily fluctuations. In Alaska and in Abu Dhabi, the batteries behave differently, and we calculate for that. He spoke quickly, clearly, without hesitation. He wasn't even looking at the host, only at the audience. Thomas was clearly thrown off. That's very detailed. That's just the beginning, Elon replied. Want to hear about estimating remaining battery life based on voltage curve analysis? The crowd applauded. Someone in the front row whispered in awe, he actually knows everything. Okay, Thomas pushed on, what about autopilot? You're not the only ones developing it. Why do you think your system is special? Elon smiled slightly. This was his territory. Because no one else is building a full glass data architecture. No third-party lidars, no blind spots. Just cameras, machine vision, and a neural net that learns faster than you can ask your next question. We have more real-world miles of data than all other companies combined. But you've had accidents, Thomas cut in. Fatal ones. Isn't that a failure? And you've never had a crash driving manual? Musk shot back. Any new technology requires adaptation. But our cars are already 10 times safer than human drivers. It's just easier for people to blame a machine than admit their own mistake. Because the car's smart, so it must be perfect, right? Silence. Even the cameras didn't move, as if they didn't want to interrupt the moment. You speak with confidence. Maybe too much, Thomas muttered. But many people think you're just good at investing. You buy other people's ideas, surround yourself with brains, and then take all the credit. I don't buy ideas, Elon said. I grow them. Like a farmer. You know the difference between an investor and a visionary? The first shows up with money and leaves with a report. The second stays in the field, even when everyone else has gone. Because he believes the seed will grow. Those words struck right at the heart of the room. For the first time, Thomas didn't know how to respond. And SpaceX, the host tried to change the subject. Isn't that just business too? It's humanity answering itself. Musk spoke for the first time not as a technician, but almost poetically. We'll either become a multiplanetary species or vanish from the face of the Earth. I'm not building rockets to profit. I'm building them to remain. Forever. Somewhere beyond the sky. But you're not a scientist. Not an astronomer. No. But I'm the guy who put a rocket into orbit when everyone laughed. And now NASA rents ships from me. Funny? There was no laughter in the hall. Only admiration. Slowly but surely, the audience was taking Elon's side. Each of his answers was like a volley, precise, loud, and unexpectedly profound. Thomas felt sweat forming on his forehead. He glanced at the director behind the glass. The man just shrugged. You started this. You're stubborn, Thomas muttered. And bold. And you're predictable, Musk replied calmly. I've seen this script. The rich tech guy comes on stage, we try to humiliate him, he gets flustered, the show ends. Only you picked the wrong guest. Another wave of applause. Some audience members stood, and this was definitely not scripted. The host stood up. Adjusted his shirt. Smirked. He had lost the round, but wanted one final jab. All right. I yield. But I have one last question, off the cards. If you're so sure of your knowledge, your tech, your vision, why did you even come here? Why agree to be part of this show at all? Elon looked at him, for a long moment. Then slowly said. Because a show is just another way to spread an idea. And if an idea is worth living for, it should be heard everywhere. Even here. He stood up. The applause didn't stop. Cameras zoomed in on faces, some filming on phones, others clapping while standing. The host was silent. The battle was over. And that night, on live television, the audience saw not just a billionaire. They saw an engineer. The pause in the studio lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. The cameras stood still, the lights kept blinding, and the host's ears buzzed, not from sound, but from the sting of defeat. Thomas Brown smiled, but it was a forced smile, stretched tight like a tie that suddenly began to choke him. Producers whispered through his earpiece, play it through. Keep the pace. But Thomas already understood, the show had slipped out of his control. Dear viewers, he said, pulling confidence back onto his face like a mask, we'll be right back after a short break. Don't go anywhere, the most interesting part is ahead. Cue graphics. Music. The camera lifts. And instantly, the tension drops. Assistants rush into the frame, a makeup artist hurries to Thomas with powder, but he waves her off. In the corner of the studio, in the shadow of the lighting rig, Elon Musk stands alone, his back to the room, as if listening to the silence. Or maybe listening to himself. A producer approaches him, a woman in her 40s, with a serious expression and a headset in her ear. Mr. Musk, that was, she hesitates for a moment. You turned everything upside down. That was insane. No, he replies calmly. I just said it like it is. The producer looks at him with a hint of admiration but doesn't linger. Time is money. Meanwhile, Thomas is trying to collect himself. He drinks water, adjusts his cufflinks, but his mind is blank. All his prepared lines suddenly feel cheap, shallow. And the scariest thing, he feels a strange respect for Elon. That infuriates him. He doesn't want to lose. He needs to regain control. 2 minutes, says an assistant. Final block. No provocations. Just a conversation. Thomas nods. But inside, a war rages. When the lights flood the studio again, the audience claps. Someone shouts, Elon. As if it's a concert, not an interview. We're back on air, says Thomas. His voice trembles slightly, but he holds it steady. With us in the studio is a man whose name is known even by those who can't tell a Model Y from a Model S, Elon Musk. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for having me, Musk replies, just as calmly. You know, I've been thinking. Thomas looks at his cue card, then sets it aside. Let's not talk about tech. Let's talk about you. The audience falls silent. Unexpectedly. Everything you do, Thomas continues, provokes either admiration or irritation. Some call you a savior. Others, a madman. And some, just lucky. But who are you really? Musk lowers his gaze. For a split second. It's not a question he's used to. This isn't a numbers game. This is something else. I'm just a person, he says quietly. Too stubborn to quit. Too curious to stop. And probably too honest to be liked by everyone. Thomas smiles. It's no longer sarcasm. It's interest. But you're constantly taking risks. With money. Reputation. People's lives, especially when it comes to space. I risk myself first and foremost, Elon counters. If a rocket fails, the laughter won't fall on the engineers. It'll be on me. If the autopilot doesn't work, they'll sue me. Not the coders. Not the designers. Me. Thomas hesitates, unsure what to say. For the first time, he doesn't feel like a hunter. More like a conversation partner. And still, he says, why? You have everything. Money, companies, legacy. Why not retire somewhere in Monaco and buy an island? Musk smirks. Because that's not the goal. That's a side effect. The real goal is the feeling that you're doing something that will outlive you. Something worth losing sleep over, skipping meals, being misunderstood. Thomas nods. For the first time, he seems to hear the real Elon, not a meme, not a Twitter avatar, but a man. And yet, he tries one last time, aren't you afraid you'll wake up one day and realize, it was all for nothing? Elon doesn't answer right away. He looks into the camera. Slowly. Deeply. Being afraid is normal. It's scary when you're not afraid. But you know, every day I wake up thinking, what if today is the day? The day it all works. And for that, it's worth moving forward. Even in the dark. A pause. A real one. No words. No movement. Then, applause. No sign. No prompt. Just because people felt, this was real. The closing credits roll in the background. The host and guest stand. Shake hands. This time, for real. When the cameras fade out, Thomas stops Elon for a second. You changed my perspective. Honestly. I didn't try to, Musk replies. I just told my truth. And walks away. Straight through the center of the studio. Past cameras, sets, and buzzing screens. An evening that started as a show ended as a confession. And those who came to laugh left in deep thought. Because sometimes one person can turn a talk show into something more. A lesson. When the studio emptied and the lights went out, an unusual silence hung in the air. For most of the show's participants, it was just another evening that would soon be forgotten. But for Thomas Brown and Elon Musk, it was only the beginning. Thomas stepped out of the studio into the corridor, trying to calm his breathing. His mind was spinning with questions, and none of them had clear answers. He didn't know what had gone wrong. Was it Elon, his confidence, his calmness? Or maybe it was himself, who had tried too long to play along, not realizing he had become part of the game? Thomas, you need to talk to Elon, someone from the production team said. They were right behind him, as if they had materialized out of nowhere. Thomas nodded. His gaze was empty, but he knew this was inevitable. No matter how much he tried to talk himself out of it, there was still one question he needed to get an answer to. A few minutes later, he was once again in the corridor, where Musk was surrounded by his team. Elon looked as he always did, confident and calm, as if nothing had happened. His eyes seemed always occupied with something more important than the world around him. Elon, Thomas began, can we talk? Musk turned, his face showing neither surprise nor irritation. Just, expectation. Of course, Elon replied. What's on your mind? For a moment, Thomas felt how his body reacted to this man's presence. He felt respect, hard to hide. It wasn't just fear. It was admiration. Do you really believe that all your projects will change the world? Thomas asked, not knowing where this question came from. Elon sighed, as though he had asked himself this question long ago. Not all of them, he answered. But I believe that if we don't start changing something right now, tomorrow might be too late. It's not for the fame. And it's not for the money. We're doing this because there's no other way. Because if I stop, others will stop. And that will be the end. Thomas wanted to ask more questions, but they stuck in his throat. He understood that he was facing something bigger. Musk wasn't just an entrepreneur or a billionaire, he was a person willing to sacrifice everything to push humanity forward. This wasn't just business, it was a mission. You've probably always been like this, Thomas said, not sure if it was admiration or despair he was feeling. Yes, Musk replied. Since the beginning. And, the older you get, the clearer you understand, you don't need to search for answers to the questions you ask yourself. You need to look for questions that don't have answers yet. And if you find them, the world will thank you. Thomas felt his views starting to change. He didn't know if he would ever be like Elon, but he knew one thing for sure, he had to keep moving forward. This was his chance. So how do you do all of this? Thomas asked, trying to bring the conversation back to a more practical note. Elon smiled slightly, and his voice became almost playful. It's simple. You're not afraid, you don't stop, and you believe that every day is a chance to change everything. I don't promise it will be easy. But if you're ready to spend your life on something greater than yourself, then you're not just changing the world. You're changing it for everyone. Thomas stood in silence, feeling how this conversation left an imprint on him that could not be erased. He knew that stepping beyond his comfort zone wasn't just a chance. It was a duty. When Elon turned and left, leaving Thomas alone in the corridor, he felt his heart beating faster. It was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter that could become not just his story, but the story of all mankind. He exhaled, feeling his perspective shift. And though he still didn't know what it would look like, he knew one thing, right now, he was standing on the threshold of something greater. Or, on the threshold of himself. Thomas Brown sat in his chair backstage, trying to understand what had just happened. It seemed like everything was in his hands, he had prepared thoroughly, knew how to lead the conversation, how to tease, how to catch him off guard. But one thing was clear. He wasn't ready to face someone for whom questions and answers didn't matter unless they went to the heart of the matter. Elon Musk didn't just dismantle his arguments, he destroyed the game itself. The host glanced at the screen again. The filming was over, but his gaze remained vacant. He felt the waves of realization hit him. Elon hadn't just answered the questions. He had shown that the conversation itself was part of the strategy. All those questions, those attempts to put him in an uncomfortable position, those weren't real battles, just empty words against which Musk was ready to fight. And Thomas had been so sure he could handle it. He thought everything was under control. And now, sitting in the dark corridor, feeling the weight of disappointment, he understood, this couldn't have happened. Elon Musk had masterfully emphasized that he wasn't just a multi-billionaire, but a person who could see the future. He made the whole world believe that engineering and technology weren't just professions, they were the path to saving humanity. When the host returned to the studio, where the moment of Elon's glory had just passed, everything seemed sleepy and strange. The audience had nearly emptied out. And in the chair where Musk had sat, there was only coldness, as though the very air had been infused with the magic of engineering genius. The viewers were leaving, but their whispers still echoed through the hall like a distant echo. Thomas approached his desk and placed the microphone down. In his eyes, it wasn't just exhaustion. It was the feeling of defeat, a deep realization that he had just witnessed something great. Elon Musk, it seemed, didn't care about such things. He didn't feel victory or defeat. For him, the show was just another arena to share his ideas. A place to create a moment that would make people think. And he did it. Musk didn't just show his competence, he became the idea itself. An idea that could not be ignored. As the audience left, they no longer discussed technology questions. They spoke of Musk as a man who could predict the future. A man who wasn't afraid to take risks because he was the risk himself. There was an atmosphere of respect in the room that could not be conveyed with words. When the filming wrapped up and the studio lights dimmed, Thomas was left alone. He struggled to get up from his seat and headed toward the exit. Elon Musk's words continued to resonate in his head. "We don't change the world for money, Thomas. We change it to stay." He didn't fully understand it yet, but he already felt that his life and his work were no longer the same. He glanced at his watch. It was already late. But instead of continuing to dwell on his disappointment, Thomas realized it was time. Time to understand what Elon Musk's words meant. Time to find his own path, even if that path wasn't at all like he had imagined. As he left the studio, it was already getting dark outside. The sounds of the city were becoming familiar again, but in his mind, one question remained: what now?